I'll never forget the sound of that HR office door closing behind me. I stood there, staring at Richard through the frosted glass as he spun his little story, calm as ever, like a man discussing the weather. When I was finally called in, a bitter, metallic taste filled my mouth, and my stomach felt like a clenched fist. Karen, the HR manager, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Richard sat beside her, arms folded, that smug little half-smile resting on his face. "James," she said, "we've completed our internal review. There's been a breach, a data leak. And based on the digital evidence," I could barely hear the rest. I just stared at Richard. He didn't even look nervous. He just stared down at his watch, pretending this was some sort of routine meeting. "You're saying I leaked company data?" I said slowly. "Karen, come on. You know me. It's out of my hands," she said softly. "The evidence points to your account." Richard sighed, playing the victim. "James, this isn't personal. You know how strict policy is." Every muscle in my body screamed to lunge across the table and wipe that fake concern from his face. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, humiliated. Security showed up 10 minutes later to walk me out. The same people I'd helped for years wouldn't even look at me. A few whispered. One or two shook their heads, pitying me like I was some kind of criminal. When the elevator doors finally closed, I caught my reflection. I saw a man who'd spent 6 years building a reputation, now reduced to a ghost in a metal box. As I stepped into the cold air outside, I muttered under my breath, "You made your move, Richard. Now I'll make mine." Before all this, I was proud of what I'd built. I didn't come from money. My mom raised me in a tiny Ohio town, juggling 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. She used to tell me, "James, do the work, tell the truth, and the rest will fall into place." That mantra carried me through college and into my job at Hailstone Technologies. I started as a junior analyst, spent nights learning code, automation, and analytics. I was never the loudest voice in the room, but my code was clean, my reports were sharp, and my predictions were accurate. By my 5th year, I was leading projects, managing teams, even mentoring interns. People respected me, maybe not as a star, but as someone dependable. I thought honesty mattered. Then Richard Hale showed up. He was my opposite. A master of corporate buzzwords and hollow promises, all delivered with a disarming smile that executives found irresistible. He didn't just enter a room, he performed in it. Within months, he was everyone's favorite. Upper management called him visionary. Clients called him brilliant. I called him dangerous. Started small. He'd edit my reports before sending them to execs. Small changes, but enough to remove my name. Then he began taking credit in meetings. "We've been developing a strategy," he'd say, meaning my strategy. Still, I bit my tongue. I figured good work speaks for itself. Then came the Raventech project. That project was my masterpiece, months of market research, algorithm design, predictive modeling. I poured everything into it. And when the presentation succeeded, Richard smiled, shook the client's hand, and said, "I'm glad my team delivered exactly what I envisioned." No mention of me, not one word. A week later, a company-wide email announced a data breach from my account. Just like that, I went from project lead to liability. First, I tried to fight it, but Richard had already deleted the digital audit trail showing my authorship. He'd even planted false access logs. It was perfect, too perfect. That night, staring at the termination letter, I swore I would find the flaw in his perfect story. He wouldn't get away with it. 3 months later, I was broke, bitter, and borderline invisible. I did whatever freelance work I could, fixing spreadsheets, analyzing data for pennies. Then one morning, I saw a post that made my blood boil. "Congratulations to Richard Hale, promoted to Vice President of Operations at Hailstone Technologies." The comments were endless. "Well deserved. A real leader. Visionary mind." A hot, useless rage surged through me, and my hand clenched into a fist, hovering inches from the screen. But then I noticed something small, a company USB drive sitting on the conference table in the photo. It had a yellow tag. Those drives were restricted use only for confidential data, and I remembered Richard always hoarded them. He'd take them home, saying, "I'll finish the report tonight." That small detail stuck in my head. If Richard had kept those files, maybe there was still a digital trail, something I could use. I reached out to an old colleague, Liam Walker, a quiet IT guy who'd left Hailstone after a disagreement with Richard. When we met at a late-night diner, I told him everything. The setup, the fake logs, the stolen credit. Liam listened, silent at first. Then he said, "I backed up a few server logs before I quit. I thought Richard was dirty. I can check if your account shows up." 2 days later, he called. "James," he said, voice shaky. "Your account didn't access the files. But guess what did? A workstation called Diagnostics 12. That's Richard's testing unit." I gripped the phone tighter. "You sure?" 100%. "He framed you." My heart was hammering against my ribs, but for the first time, it wasn't the frantic beat of fear. It was the steady, powerful rhythm of purpose. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. He really did it. And for the first time since losing everything, I had hope and a target. You'd think finding proof would make me feel relieved. It didn't. It made me furious. Every night, I replayed those moments. Being escorted out, hearing whispers behind me, watching Richard smile as if I were already erased. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, heart racing. The hot rage from my firing had cooled into something heavier, a lead weight sitting in my chest that demanded action, not just anger. Part of me wanted to send those logs straight to HR. But what would that do? They'd sweep it under the rug to protect themselves. Richard was too valuable to them now. The more I thought about it, the more I realized justice wouldn't come from inside the system. It would come from me. So I went digging. I started tracking vendor accounts tied to Richard's projects. And sure enough, fake invoices, dummy companies, small payments that didn't match any service provided. The guy wasn't just a manipulator. He was a thief. That's when I decided to trap him. I created a fake consulting company online. A real website, fake portfolio, fake contact info. Then I emailed him from that alias, pretending to offer insider market data. He bit within hours. When I got his reply, "Let's discuss privately," I laughed out loud. He had no idea the man he'd destroyed was sitting on the other end of that email. That night, as I stared at my reflection, I whispered, "You took my name, Richard. Now I'll take yours." Our first call was short but telling. I recorded every second. Richard was smooth as ever. "Discretion is key," he said. "Let's make sure this stays off the record." He talked about acquiring insights, about sharing compensation privately. His words were vague enough to sound legal, but I knew exactly what he meant. When I hung up, I played the recording 3 times. It wasn't enough to destroy him yet, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Liam discovered something else. Richard's personal email linked to payments from fake vendor accounts. He even found deposits in Richard's name routed through offshore transfers. We had him. We just needed to stay quiet long enough to spring the trap. But Richard must have sensed something. One night, Liam called me, voice trembling. "Someone broke into my apartment. My hard drive's gone." I froze. "You think? Who else?" "He knows." A cold dread washed over me, so sudden it felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. We were exposed. That night, I sat at my desk in the dark, staring at the flashing cursor on my screen. The anger wasn't hot anymore. It was cold, sharp, and focused. I backed up everything offline, encrypted it, printed copies, and locked them in a safe deposit box. Richard wanted to erase me again, but this time I was ready. A week later, my door burst open at 6 a.m. 2 police officers stood there with a warrant. "James Carter?" one asked. "You're under investigation for hacking Hailstone Technologies systems." For a second, I just stared at them. "You've got the wrong guy." They didn't care. They confiscated my devices, my hard drives, everything. Richard had filed another report. And once again, the digital logs pointed to me. He'd cloned my old credentials. He'd built a trap and waited for me to walk right into it. I was detained for questioning, released on bail 12 hours later. When I got home, I found my apartment trashed. Someone had gone through my files. Liam vanished. His phone disconnected. I sat there, in the dark, staring at my empty desk. I'd lost everything again. And yet, this time felt different. I wasn't broken. I was furious. If Richard wanted to end me, he should have done it properly because I was done hiding. That night, under the flickering kitchen light, I promised myself, he started this war. I'll finish it. I went silent for months. No contact with anyone. I moved into a small basement room and started over from scratch. I studied corporate law, data forensics, whistleblower protection. I learned how to play his game and win it. Then one day, I overheard two Hailstone employees talking about an upcoming conference. Richard was unveiling Project Nova, a revolutionary analytics system. The name made my blood boil. It was my old Raven Tech model, rebranded and stolen again. That was the final straw. I contacted an old friend, Nora Alvarez, an investigative journalist I'd once helped with a tech expose. When we met, I told her everything. Every lie, every setup, every theft. She took notes silently, then said, "You realize this could take him and the company down, right?" I nodded. "That's the plan." We spent weeks building the case. She verified transactions, interviewed former employees, pulled public records. We found that Richard had embezzled over $800,000 through shell vendors. We had proof, but I didn't want to leak it quietly. I wanted the world to see him crumble. That's when Nora said, "What if you expose him at the conference? He'll be on stage. Cameras rolling." I smiled. Perfect. We prepared everything, a duplicate of his presentation loaded with evidence. When he'd reach slide 21, it would switch to a pre-recorded video exposing every single one of his crimes. It would be public, live, and unforgettable. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted justice, and I was going to deliver it. The day of the conference, the thumping in my chest was so loud I was sure the tech crew next to me could hear it over their headsets. The ballroom was full, investors, execs, cameras. Richard was at the front, shaking hands, laughing, basking in attention. I wore a tech crew badge I'd borrowed through Nora's contacts. Headset, clipboard, confidence. Nobody questioned me. In the control booth, I replaced his presentation file with mine. Identical at first glance until the switch halfway through. Nora sat in the third row, ready to publish her article the moment the video played. The lights dimmed. The applause started. Richard walked on stage, smiling like a politician. He started his speech. "At Hailstone, innovation isn't just what we do. It's who we are." I almost laughed. He moved through the slides flawlessly. The crowd loved him. Then, slide 21 appeared. The screen flickered once, twice, and then went black. And then my voice filled the room. "My name is James Carter. I was fired from Hailstone for a crime I didn't commit. The man you're listening to right now, Richard Hale, framed me. And this is the proof." The crowd gasped. The screen lit up with documents, emails, payment records, timestamps. Everything. The blood drained from Richard's face, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask of disbelief as his carefully constructed world shattered around him. "Turn that off," he shouted. But he couldn't. His empire was collapsing in real time. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters grabbed their phones, snapping photos and filming. On the big screen, the evidence played, Richard's emails showing vendor fraud, his fake contracts, his secret payments. The final frame was the best, his signature approving fake vendor invoices. He turned toward the crowd, shouting, "This is fake. It's all fake." But the evidence was irrefutable. Nora's article went live at that exact moment. Hailstone VP exposed for fraud, embezzlement, and employee sabotage. The crowd turned on him instantly. Investors walked out. Executives whispered furiously. Security stepped in to escort him off stage. Not to protect him, but to contain the scene. By the next morning, it was everywhere. News outlets, Twitter, TV. Richard Hale, the visionary VP, exposed as a fraud. Hailstone's stock crashed. The board suspended him indefinitely. A week later, the FBI raided his house. I watched it all unfold from my couch, coffee in hand. When I saw his mugshot appear on TV, I didn't smile. I just breathed. For the first time in years, it didn't hurt to exist. Months later, Hailstone issued a public apology. They offered me a settlement, a lot of money and a non-disclosure agreement. They offered a settlement that would have set me up for life on one condition: a non-disclosure agreement. I refused it without a second thought, telling them, "You can keep your silence. I'll keep my integrity." Liam came back into the picture, alive and cautious but proud. We met again at our usual diner. "You actually did it," he said, grinning. "You brought him down." I smiled. "He did that himself. I just made sure people were watching." Nora won an award for her investigation. She called me the quiet man who refused to disappear. I started working for a smaller firm that valued ethics over ego. For once, my work felt meaningful again. One afternoon, I drove back to my hometown and visited my mom's grave. I told her everything: the betrayal, the revenge, the redemption. Standing there, I realized something. I realized that I hadn't won by becoming a monster like Richard. I had won by refusing to let him turn me into one. Before I left, I whispered, "You were right, Mom. The truth always comes through. You just have to be patient." Now I keep one small reminder framed on my desk, a sticky note that says, "Don't be loud, be undeniable." That note saved me, because sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's exposure. Not shouting, but shining light on the lies. Richard wanted me erased. Instead, my story became the one thing he'll never escape. And that is the sweetest kind of justice.